the coast, and even here I think we'll see some sunny spells at times of the day, but the best of the sunshine for the most part will be inland, with some fair weather cloud bubbling up, maybe the odd shower, and again reasonable warmth to be had, 18 to 20 degrees, perhaps not quite as high as what we'll see today, but still pretty good for the time of year. So Saturday set fair then, the odd shower possible, on the whole some sunshine, progressively turning a bit cloudier, a bit cooler, a bit wetter as we move through Sunday and Monday, and as it does so, those temperatures come back down to the mid-teens. Take care.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes & Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome to another 2-hour On The Money special, you lucky people, on this Good Friday. Here we're focused on the UK's cost of living crisis, helping you beat the squeeze. I'm Liam Halligan, and we'll be talking today about the social media platform Twitter, which tech guru Elon Musk wants to buy for £33 billion. That's £33,000 million. Why? What for? We host a detailed discussion. Plus, an update on that Easter travel chaos and our latest Startup Britain feature, a brand new company that sets out to help the self-employed. All that and more after the GB News headlines with Tamsin Roberts.
Liam, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 1 o'clock. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Russia has responded to the sinking of one of its warships by bombarding Ukraine's capital with missiles. Footage from the early hours of Friday morning show a region of Kiev being struck by bombs. It's after US defense officials say the loss of the Russian warship Moskva in the Black Sea is a big blow to Moscow's military capabilities. The vessel sank after Ukrainian forces claimed to have hit it with missiles on Wednesday. However, the Kremlin claims the vessel went down after an explosion on board. The US National Security Advisor says it's a significant loss to the Kremlin.
It's a big blow to Russia. This is their flagship, the Moscow, and they have now been forced to admit that it has been badly damaged. And they've had to kind of choose between two stories. One story is that it was just incompetence, and the other was that they came under attack, and neither is a particularly good outcome for them.
The first asylum seekers considered to have arrived in the UK illegally could be sent to Rwanda within weeks. A senior Downing Street advisor says the government's new scheme will soon be operational. Yesterday, the Prime Minister confirmed migrants who have crossed the Channel illegally will be flown thousands of miles away for processing. Boris Johnson said the £120 million deal will serve as a considerable deterrent. The chair of Migration Watch, Alp Mehmet, told GB News that without this deterrent, hundreds more people will die.
not suddenly going to stop all the boats coming across. Of course it's not. It's part of the solution, though. Is it more humane to allow people to risk their lives in dinghies, in really unseaworthy vessels? That's a nonsense. It isn't inhumane. I think this is actually a kind thing to be doing.
Well, UK immigration lawyer Harjit Singh Bangal said the scheme is similar to the one adopted by Australia and says it's unworkable and too expensive.
Last year, Australia processed 249 people offshore. It cost them £461 million, so UK pounds. If we're thinking, and the expectations are now, in the eyes of the British public, oh, this is great, there's going to be 20,000 people sent to Rwanda, their figures just don't make sense at all. £120 million isn't going to cut it.
Hundreds of Palestinians have been detained after clashes with Israeli police at one of Jerusalem's holiest sites. Officers attempted to disperse a large crowd of people at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, also known as Temple Mount. Israeli authorities say groups were throwing rocks at the compound after morning prayer. Emergency services say at least 150 people have been injured. The clashes come as Christians, Jews and Muslims prepare to celebrate Easter, Passover and Ramadan. Twitter's chief executive has reportedly told staff the company's not what he called being held hostage following a takeover bid by Elon Musk. The billionaire Tesla owner is attempting to buy the company for more than £33 billion. In a letter to the board of Twitter, he said he wants to release its potential to boost free speech and democracy across the world. Former military intelligence officer and cyber expert Philip Ingram raised some concerns over the potential purchase.
He's an influencer, and the question is, should an influencer have the ability to control platforms that can, at best, try and suggest the way people would think, at worst, manipulate the way people could think?
Dozens of climate change protesters have been arrested after blocking access to 3 oil terminals. Just Stop Oil activists blocked roads and climbed on top of oil tankers in Staffordshire and Essex. The group, who are linked to Extinction Rebellion, are demanding the government stops new oil and gas projects. One campaigner says the government aren't doing enough.
And obviously we don't do this lightly. We've tried everything else. We've literally done everything we possibly could to get this message across. And it's not a message, it's a cry for help. It's an emergency, and we need to be acting like it's an emergency. The UN says it's a code red for humanity, and the government are just failing.
England's Test cricket captain Joe Root says stepping down from the role is the most challenging decision of his career. Root holds the record for the highest number of Test match wins as captain since he took on the role in 2017. But he's chosen to leave after 2 series defeats against the West Indies last month and Australia in the winter. Vice-captain Ben Stokes has paid tribute, saying Root has been a privilege to work with. Millions of drivers are taking to the roads today in what's predicted to be the busiest travel day of the Easter weekend. According to the RAC, just over 4.6 million journeys are to be made across the UK today, with a further 22.5 million over the weekend. Passengers have also been warned of train delays as Network Rail carries out engineering projects across the weekend. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens. Now, though, let's get back to Liam and On the Money.
And coming up on The Money today, Tesla manufacturer Elon Musk wants to buy the social media platform Twitter, which has hundreds of millions of users around the world. Why does he want it? To make money, seek attention, promote free speech? Or to wind up his old nemesis, Facebook founder Mark Zuckerberg? We delve into what could be the biggest tech takeover in history. It's an astonishing corporate drama. And with the self-employed now accounting for almost 1 in 6 of the UK workforce, is there enough support for freelancers? Today's guest on Startup Britain doesn't think so. He's on a mission to help those hoping to start their own business, especially youngsters. And as ever, I want your questions, opinions, ideas. What do you think of the issues raised in today's On the Money? Email us gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews. And stay with us, because this is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're On the Money. The gazillionaire Elon Musk has admitted he is not sure his takeover bid for Twitter will be successful. Surely the more important question is why the boss of the electric vehicle firm Tesla wants to buy the social media firm in the first place. Musk says he's offered $54.20 a share, which values Twitter at an astonishing, wait for it, $43 billion, that's $43,000 million, or £33 billion. Musk says he's the right person to unlock the company's extraordinary potential. He said if the Twitter board rejects his offer, he would need to reconsider his position as a shareholder. Tesla, which Musk controls, currently owns 9.2% of Twitter's stock. Musk says the offer should anyway go to a vote of all shareholders. One such is Saudi Prince Al-Walid bin Talal, who has shunned Musk's bid. Maybe that's because Musk says he wants Twitter to take a more hands-off approach to policing the platform's content. Twitter's banned certain users, of course, not least former US President Donald Trump. Is that why one Washington Post columnist, Max Boot, tweeted he is frightened by the impact on society and politics if Elon Musk acquires Twitter? Musk seems to believe that on social media anything goes, says Boot. But for democracy to survive, he argues, we need more content moderation, not less. Meanwhile, someone else, GBNews presenter Nigel Farage, no less, a friend of Trump, responded on Twitter, this is the best news for free speech in years. Musk has been attacking Facebook's Mark Zuckerberg also, calling him the Sun King, given what Musk calls his total power over Facebook, WhatsApp and Instagram. The two tech giants share a contentious history. Musk once publicly deleted his company's Facebook pages, tweeting that the company gave him the willies. So what are Elon Musk's motives in trying to buy Twitter? Business, free speech, attention-seeking, all three? And that's our On the Money question today. Why does Elon Musk want Twitter? Grown-up conversations with people who really want their stuff. That's what we do here on The Money. And today I'm joined by Charles Arthur. He's a technology journalist and author of Social Warming, The Dangerous and Polarising Effects of Social Media. Great to have you on the show as ever, Charles. James Bors, director at Bor Group Limited. That's an information tech consultancy. And Ian Corby is the executive director of Age Verification Providers Association. And in the studio, friend of the show, Vicky Price, chief economic advisor at the Centre for Economic and Business Research. Great to have you with us as ever, Vicky. Firstly, happy Easter to all of you. Let's start with you, Charles. Charles, tell me, why is it that Elon Musk wants Twitter? Does it make business sense, first off?
It doesn't make business sense, no. Everyone thinks that they can unlock the, quote, real value of Twitter. And it has to be said, if Twitter didn't exist, you'd need to invent it. It's the world's news wires. It's the place where you go when news is breaking. It's the place where you find things out. But the problem is that in advertising terms, it's a very poor third to Google and to Facebook. So he admitted in a discussion with Chris Anderson of TED Talks just the other day that he doesn't think he would be able to get all that value out of it. But at the same time, he thinks that it's so important that he should take it private and do things with it, which seem to revolve around more free speech. But listening to him talk about those things with Chris Anderson, he didn't seem to diverge too much from what one would expect is actually going on already at the moment in Twitter.
For Elon Musk, it is largely about free speech. It's a trophy asset. It's about society rather than boosting his own already massive fortune.
Very much, yeah. He's a weird person in the sense that he's both very rational and very irrational. He tweets a lot, and sometimes it's a complete stream of consciousness, which you wouldn't be surprised to see from an 18-year-old. Other times it's very thoughtful and considering sort of big concepts like extraplanetary life and blockchain and how you can apply it to everyday life. So he's this strange mixture, and I think it's a mistake to try to think that you can understand whether he knows what his motives are. It's the sort of thing where he just gets up one one day and says, I know, I'll buy Twitter. It seems like a good idea. And it's almost impulsive. But the fact is that by buying 9.2% of the shares, as he has done, he's effectively made its value go up because he is, as was said in the earlier package, he's an influencer. So he influences the price up. If he sells now, he's made a profit. And he might not get the Twitter that he wants, but it'll be a Twitter that is very happy to have him on because, rather like Donald Trump did, he pulls people in.
Very interesting. James Bohr, what do you make of this? Why do you think Elon Musk wants Twitter? Is it maybe just a speculative play, as Charles Arthur's just suggested?
Purely speculating here, but when someone's been charged by the SEC for securities fraud for misleading tweets to manipulate a market, I'm sure that has nothing to do with why he wants Twitter, along with accusations more recently of trying to manipulate cryptocurrency markets in a similar way, again through tweets. He's got this huge following, and anything that gives him more authority over that, probably appealing.
Ian Corby, let's come to you. Now, you're the Executive Director of Age Verification Providers Association. We've got the online safety bill coming up here in the UK next week, a very contentious bill. A lot of people think that's going to curtail free speech. If you're not a Twitter user, or if you just dabble, if you're just a regular person watching or listening to this discussion, why should we care who owns Twitter? Or should we?
Well, I think the most remarkable sort of headline-grabbing moment was really when Elon Musk said he wanted it to sort of reinvent Twitter's free speech credentials. And, you know, Twitter's legal counsel used to say they were the free speech wing of the free speech party. So they were already a relatively liberal, unregulated, open forum. But they realised that that was just leading to a lot of harms to their users. And so Twitter, even coming from that sort of philosophical position, have decided to put in protections for their users and to seek to reduce that level of harm. And my concern is that we're getting to a situation where the amount of protection that we offer, particularly kids online, is going to be down to the whim of a billionaire in Silicon Valley. And the great thing about the online safety bill is that it's going to set a level playing field, and it's going to allow Parliament to make the decisions about what is harmful and what is not, and what these platforms, particularly the very large ones, are responsible to do in order to protect kids when they're online, and in some cases adults as well.
So, Ian, let me get this straight. If this online safety bill goes through next Tuesday, we'll obviously be looking at it closely next week on GB News, and particularly here on The Money. Is there any way that lawmakers here can actually regulate what is a global platform like Twitter? Surely Twitter can still do what it wants. We're not going to block the whole of Twitter, are we?
Well, we learnt a lot when we were going to try to implement age verification for pornography previously, until the government got cold feet on that. And what we learnt was the only way you can focus the minds of these global platforms is hitting them where it hurts, in the pocket. And so the online safety bill is coming with a lot of powers to intervene, not only to try and block sites and access to sites which are refusing to be compliant, but also to intervene on the services that support them, whether that's search services or payment services or hosting services, advertising platforms. All the things that make the commercial aspects of the internet operate can be used to put pressure on these platforms to come into line with UK law. Because while it is the World Wide Web, that doesn't mean to say that these companies don't have to comply with the democratic will of the British Parliament when it comes to obeying our laws when they're operating in this country.
Vicky Price, you've worked within Whitehall at a very senior level, regulatory bodies and so on. We're going to carry this discussion on after the break, and we'll talk about the online bill then. But just what's your opening response to this sort of battle for Twitter, this ongoing spat between Musk on the one hand and Zuckerberg on the other, and you got somebody as well informed as Charles Arthur saying he probably doesn't even know what he wants to do with it?
I think the interesting thing is that there are more controls now going through various parliaments and the European Commission and so on in terms of what platforms like Twitter are allowed to do. So irrespective of what happens here in the UK, I think things are tightening up. So whether it's a privately held company, if that's what he wants to do, because he wants to take it, as you probably remember, it went public in 2013.
So his shares are listed on the stock exchange.
They are now.
He may want to delist it and hold the shares himself.
Yes.
Less scrutiny.
Absolutely. Less scrutiny in terms of what he wants to do with it, in terms of getting all sorts of things happening without needing to get a lot of shareholder approval. But at the end of the day, in terms of the output, it's still going to have to go through all sorts of regulatory sort of hoops, whether he likes it or not. That's how things are developing. And there is a lot of concern generally about how social media is being used right now. As you know, things are tightening up all around the world. But the interesting thing is, what happens to companies like that? Twitter, as far as I can tell, only really made a profit, a small one, in 2018 and 2019, since it started existing. And this is a company which is still valued, as you were saying...
I don't get it.
You know, over £30 billion.
I don't understand where the value is. Obviously, it's got a huge... I tell you, let's ask Charles. Charles, before we go to the break, why is this thing... Of course, it's got an incredible database, you know, hundreds of millions of users across the world. You know, 20 million in the UK alone, lots of big data, so to speak. But I don't see that many adverts on Twitter. Maybe I'm not important enough to get all the adverts. I don't see where the revenue is going to come from. As Vicky Price says, it hardly seems to make any money. And yet it's valued at upwards of $40 billion.
A lot of Twitter's value, if we're talking about the actual inherent value of the service itself, comes from the fact that there are so many users on there, there are so many important users on there, there is such good transmission of information. As I said, if it didn't exist, you'd have to invent it, because it would be such a necessary thing in a world where the internet exists, where everyone has a phone, where they can send what's happening out into the ether straight away. You want somewhere that's going to effectively centralize it and then redistribute it. So Twitter has this enormous value as the newswire for the planet. So that's completely uncontentious, I think. That's what Musk sees himself as well. And that's what he said in this conversation with Chris Anderson. It's so valuable in that way. So your question is, why doesn't Twitter therefore have colossal revenues? It's because it's very bad at actually focusing on people and targeting adverts in the way that Facebook does or that Google does. Google gets the advantage that people come to it and do a search. Their search is the intent of what they want to buy, so they can target the adverts. Facebook builds up a profile of you. It knows what you want to do. But on Twitter, it's very poor at doing the profiling, and that's its weakness. If it was as good as Facebook is at doing the profiling, it would be rich. And Mark Zuckerberg, once called Twitter a clown car that drove into a gold mine. He said basically these people don't know what they're doing, and yet they're in the most fantastic place. And it's absolutely true. And people have said that if you could really unlock Twitter's value to people, that would be the way to go. One suggestion I've seen is that it should be subscription. I think that may be an Elon Musk suggestion. If you had to pay a subscription to use Twitter, you'd actually start to unlock that value, because you'd really see who wanted to be on there. And it would be all the newsmakers, the news takers, who would be on there in their millions.
Very interesting, Charles. Stay with us. We're coming back to this important question after the break. Why does Elon Musk want to own Twitter? Stay with me. You're on the money with Liam Halligan.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking dry for many, with some sunshine, but cloudier in the west. Let's take a look at the details. Skies are likely to be cloudy across parts of Devon and Cornwall this afternoon, with some drizzle and sea fog in the west. Further east, it'll be brighter with some warm, sunny spells. The brightness extends into southeast England, where there'll be plenty of sunny spells this afternoon, feeling warm in the sunshine with a high of 23 Celsius in London today. It's a cloudier picture for much of Wales, with some patchy drizzle over the hills. The sunshine could break through at times in the east, where it'll feel warm. After a bright start in northwest England, a little cloud will bubble up this afternoon, perhaps with 1 or 2 showers. However, most places should stay dry and warm. A bright and warm day in the northeast too, with some sunny spells. It could be cloudier at times along the coast of Northumberland. There'll be a touch of sunshine in eastern Scotland, where it'll feel pleasantly warm, but skies will be cloudier in the west. The cloud could bring a few spots of drizzle at times. Thicker cloud in Northern Ireland will bring some heavy showers this afternoon. The heavy downpours could bring hail and a few rumbles of thunder too.
Showers will gradually ease this evening, leaving a dry end to the day for most and a mild evening too. And that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're on the money with me, Liam Halligan. We're talking about the social media platform Twitter, which tech guru Elon Musk, the man behind those Tesla electric cars, he wants to buy it for £33 billion. That's 33,000 million. Crikey, 33 and 9 zeros. What does he want it for? We're asking, why does Elon Musk want to buy Twitter? Fabulous panel here. We just heard from Charles Arthur, the author of Social Warming, the dangerous and polarising effects of social media. Let's talk now to James Bohr of Bohr Group. James, you just heard Charles there before the break. He quoted Mark Zuckerberg, who said, Twitter's such a mess, it's like a clown car drove into a gold mine. Charles was describing how Twitter isn't very good at directing ads to users in the way that Facebook is. It's hard to monetize Twitter. Do you think one reason Elon Musk wants to buy Twitter is because he wants to make those changes, to try and make it more targeted, to try and monetize it more, to enhance the value of the company? Is it technically possible to do that?
It's definitely technically possible to do that. However, well, it might be part of his intention, but I think there'll be a problem, because if you do profile it, if you do start adding subscriptions, there is a risk with Twitter in particular, where it benefits from this immense value because it is so accessible and so chaotic and the conversations are so open. If you start restricting that, it's going to lose that value very quickly. And there are other platforms out there that will remain open. So it's entirely possible it could destroy it if they try to bring too much top-down control in place.
Very interesting. Let's go back to Ian Corby now of Age Verification Providers Association. Ian, we were discussing before the break the online safety bill, which is coming before the British Parliament on Tuesday. I know you're more into the technical and regulatory side, but what do you make of the kind of political fervour that's now surrounding the future of Twitter? There's plenty of political fervour when it comes to our own online safety bill. We've got, the fact that Donald Trump was taken off Twitter, that's upset a lot of people. On the other hand, a lot of people feel it's necessary because we need to have discussion moderated online on such mass reach platforms of Twitter in order to maintain social order. Where do you fall in that debate?
Well, I won't be drawn too far into the politics, but I do think politicians tread carefully around these platforms because they are really important mechanisms for them to get their messages out to their constituents. And so there has been a reluctance, I think, in the past to take too dramatic action to regulate these platforms. But I think when we see that 42% of kids under the age of 13 have a social media account, when that's against the terms and conditions of most of these platforms, we realise that there's a significant problem and some action is required. I mean, one of the big impacts of the bill when we look at it on Tuesday is going to be the opportunity to get rid of anonymity online. And I think we all know that one of the biggest concerns people have about Twitter is the anonymous trolls, the people who come on and do these pylons, whether it's on football players or politicians or just people who happen to be in the news for one reason or another, by these anonymous accounts, bot accounts that are just set up at a whim. And part of the bill is to give you the opportunity to engage only with others who have given away their identity, so have made themselves identifiable to the platforms. Now, I think in line with what we do with age verification, we don't think it's a great idea to hand over your passport to Elon Musk. So hopefully there will be an opportunity to, again, use independent third-party providers who will check your identity as well as your age and then confirm to a platform that you are identifiable, but not actually disclose your full identity to that platform. But that, I think, could really change the nature of the conversation on Twitter when you can literally check a box and get rid of all those anonymous twat trolls.
That's a very interesting point. Vicky, let me throw this to you. It's a really tough question. On the one hand, politicians need to regulate these social media platforms. On the other hand, some of the social media platforms think they need to regulate the politicians. Now, of course, there are rules in the UK and the US about hate speech and so on. But, I mean, look, whatever you think of Donald Trump, the guy was president and he's still polling 70, 80% approval ratings among Republicans in some key states. He could easily become the Republican nominee for the presidency again. Can a private company feasibly refuse him a platform? Because while he may be distasteful to them, he is, according to voters, a mainstream politician.
This is a very interesting question and a very difficult one, just as you said. But there have been all sorts of cases when banks refuse to have particular clients, for example, or audit firms and accounting firms refuse to, as some did, to have Maxwell as their client. You can decide that for a particular reason you're doing this. Now, lots of other people could question it and wonder why. And as we know, Donald Trump is starting his own company anyway, or has started his own company. But I think it's a question of whether some of what is being spread is disinformation or whether it's inciting to do whatever you feel.
The 6th of January storming of the Capitol, for instance.
Exactly.
Did Trump incite that? Well, that's a contentious issue, but it's certainly an issue.
Yes, and therefore decisions are made as to whether, you might actually fall foul of some of the regulators if you allow various things to still happen. But I think this point of anonymous ones is really interesting because, of course, people start all sorts of accounts which are fictional, if you like, and they just don't exist in reality. In other words, there isn't a real... Well, there is a person, but they hide behind...
So-called bots, like robotic use of artificial intelligence to pummel people, of course. Really incredible.
Which is quite difficult to regulate. And, Twitter is actually generally... So let's say I opened an account myself some time ago because someone else was impersonating me.
Yeah. And your Twitter handle is indeed the real Vicky Price, isn't it?
Yes, absolutely. So we had to do that. But they did actually check, in my case, quite carefully that it was indeed me. I had to put a case to say that. So, and yet someone else was able to be me.
Yeah.
Which was really
very scary. Charles, let me come back to you on this. You and I have known each other a long time. You are by no means a natural ally of Donald Trump, if I may say so. But what do you think of this conundrum? I'm sure you've thought about it. Can Twitter justifiably keep, a former US president who may be a future US president off their platform?
It is a huge question, as Vicky said. I mean, I just want to very briefly detour, and on the anonymity thing, I'd say, if you think stopping anonymity is the solution, just look at Facebook. You get people being pretty vile on Facebook and they're using their real name. So that's not actually the solution. And certainly on Twitter, there's already a mechanism where you can tick a box and you won't see the unverified responses and so on. So to some extent, these things have been thought about. If Trump was the Republican nominee, or, God save us all, if he became the president again, could Twitter still refuse him? I think actually they could. They could say, look, you're the president. You have as many channels as you could possibly want to get out to the public. You have the office of the president. Before Twitter existed, presidents were able to get their message out one way or another. They can commandeer the TV airwaves and the radio airwaves. They have the attention of the press all the time they want. We permanently banned you, so I'm sorry, Donald, but your behavior simply wasn't up to it. So actually, I think, yes, they could do that. It would be pretty, incredible, and it would no doubt lead to the most incredible house. It would indeed, but it would basically put whether the rule of law applies, which is that companies can decide for themselves how they run themselves, versus whether the government could force them, because this would be the government forcing Twitter into speech, which would break the American First Amendment. So they would actually, it would be illegal for Donald Trump to force himself onto Twitter.
Very, very interesting. I'm going to ask you that again soon, Charles. Charles Arthur there, who is the author of Social Warming, The Dangerous and Polarising Effects of Social Media. James Bohr of Bohr Group Limited. Ian Corby of Age Verification Providers Association, and Vicky Price in the studio is staying with us. Thanks to all of you for a really, really interesting discussion here on The Money. Why does Elon Musk want to buy Twitter? We still don't really know, but we've certainly had a good romp through the issues there. This is On The Money with me, Liam Halligan. After the break, do you run your own company, or do you wish to start your own business one day? Well, today's Startup Britain guest founded an online platform that aims to help freelancers and startups. More on that in just a moment, and much more after the GB News headlines with Tamsin Roberts.
Liam, thank you. It's 1:34. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Russia has vowed to increase its missile strikes on Ukraine following the sinking of one of its warships. Footage from the early hours of this morning shows a region in the capital of Kiev being struck by bombs. It's after US defense officials say the loss of the Russian warship Moskva in the Black Sea is a big blow to Moscow's military capabilities. The vessel sank after Ukrainian forces claimed to have hit it with missiles on Wednesday. However, the Kremlin claims the vessel went down after an explosion on board. Hundreds of Palestinians have been detained after clashes with Israeli police at one of Jerusalem's holiest sites. Officers attempted to disperse a large crowd of people at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, also known as Temple Mount. Israeli authorities say groups were throwing rocks at the compound after morning prayer. Emergency services say at least 150 people have been injured. The clashes come as Christians, Jews and Muslims prepare to celebrate Easter, Passover and Ramadan. Dozens of climate change protesters have been arrested after blocking access to 3 oil terminals. Just Stop Oil activists blocked roads and climbed on top of oil tankers in Staffordshire and Essex. The group, who are linked to Extinction Rebellion, are demanding the government stops new oil and gas projects. Travellers are facing disruption and traffic jams today in what's been described as the busiest travel day of the Easter weekend. According to the RAC, just over 4.6 million journeys are to be made across the UK today, with a further 22.5 million over the weekend. Passengers have also been warned of train delays as Network Rail carries out engineering projects across the weekend. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. In just a moment, it's back to Liam and On the Money.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome back. You are on the money. Our Good Friday 2-hour special, you lucky people, on GB News, TV, DAB+, digital radio and online. It's 1:38 and drivers are being warned of congestion as they make long journeys during one of the busiest Easters for years, with over 22 million leisure trips expected to be made during this bank holiday weekend. That's according to the RAC. Well, keeping a watchful eye on the motorway, our East Midlands reporter Will Hollis. He's been loitering around the M1 in Nottinghamshire. Here he is.
Yes, well, as you can see here, it is sunshine and blue skies in Nottinghamshire, at least on this portion of the M1, junction 26 to be precise. For local people, for people in the East Midlands, you'll remember that as the junction that you come off for the big IKEA at Giltbrook. You can see behind me lots of cars travelling today on the M1, lots of big camper vans, lots of caravans, and of course lots of smaller cars where you can see the families and all of the luggage tightly packed up inside. Someone earlier said to me on Twitter when I was here at about 6 a.m, 7 a.m, Will, why are you on the M1 at that time in the morning? It looks incredibly quiet. How can you call it travel chaos? Well, travel chaos maybe not on this part of the M1, but in lots of other parts of the country there are gridlock congestions. We're hearing reports of problems on the M6, on the M25, and of course some real long tailbacks of HGV lorries on the M20 to Dover. A lot of this trouble caused, of course, by the big Easter rush to get away. Good Friday, 4 million people expected to take leisure trips today alone. That's part of 22 million, a massive amount of leisure trips to take place just over this four-day weekend bank holiday. So a lot of people getting out on the roads. There is obviously that pent-up demand, that pent-up desire to get out and celebrate this little bit of sunshine, especially when after the last 2 years, of the pandemic, we've been kept away from those holiday destinations. A lot of people that maybe didn't have the confidence before to get out, to get away, are making that decision today, tomorrow, and across the weekend. Now, of course, the advice to get out as early as you can. You may have missed that marker today to get out before 9 a.m. When this programme is going out, but you can certainly travel at a later time today. The RAC recommends that you travel between 9 a.m. travel before 9 a.m. and after 7:30 p.m. You can also make that advice matter tomorrow if you did want to get out on Saturday. The other bits of advice, of course, check your car, check your tyres, make sure that you've got enough fuel. But that, of course, is a big problem because in some parts of the country, tanks are running on half, and a lot of people are struggling to get fuel in some of the different areas of the UK, as well as those prices. It is a little bit of a perfect storm. It is a really difficult thing to do, to get out and about on the roads today. But when you've got sunshine like this and you've got destinations all around the coastline and inland as well, it'd be very hard not to make the choice to get out on the road today.
Will Hollis there in Nottinghamshire, and you know, unless I was mistaken, the sun was gradually coming out there as Will was speaking. Be happy, it's Easter, and I hope you're not stuck in a traffic jam as you're listening to GB News. It's time now for Startup Britain, On the Money's regular slot featuring some of the UK's freshest new firms. Well, there are 4.1 million self-employed people in Britain now. That's according to the Office for National Statistics. Those running their own businesses make up around 15% of the country's workforce. But Albert Aziz Clausen says the UK fails to equip some of the most skilled individuals in the world with the knowledge or tools they need to build a business around their skills. That's why in 2018, he raised £1 million as an undergraduate to set up Underpinned, an online platform focused on helping freelancers build a portfolio, find and manage clients and projects, and produce invoices and contracts. And last week, Underpinned partnered with 3 major London universities to help more than 22,000 commercialise their skills if they want to start a business. And here to tell us more, it is Albert Aziz Clausen, my latest guest on Startup Britain. Albert, great to have you on the show. You're most welcome here in the On the Money studio. Why did you want to set up your own business? Why not just work for somebody like a normal person?
I think the attitude towards setting up my own business was much less about wanting to start a business and much more about the project itself. I've been working with so many different people in so many different sectors as a freelancer, as a consultant. I ran a media and arts company that helped young and emerging artists build their businesses. And so I was constantly surrounded by all of these people that wanted to work in this way. And it was very, very obvious to me that they didn't really know how to. No one had left education or full-time employment really knowing how to set up a business. And in the UK, we have this massive wealth of skills embedded in our education, but it's very academic because it's used to going into a very linear format of employment. And that's changing very rapidly. So when I was at the end of my university career doing this freelance work and running this media business, I started to look at systems we could set up to help people get through this. And now you'll see that the older demographics are much more successful at moving into being a freelancer or an independent business because they've spent years in a commercial world and understand how to set objectives, often because they've been at quite a high level. Whereas people coming into it now who are looking at this more transient style of work have never had access to that information because they've never worked within companies where they've been at that level to make those decisions. And so Underpinned, our company, is all about giving people access to that understanding to help them commercialize these really valuable skills within a commercial context.
That's very, very interesting. You've just struck a chord with me, if I may say so, because, of course, for your generation, many more of you are going to be self-employed than even for my generation or my parents' generation, because there's just less 9-to-5 bog standard careers around. That's the way the economy is going. So a lot of people leaving university of your generation, if you like, they are going to have to set up their own businesses. They are going to have to be gig workers. They are going to have to, you know, busk around a little bit. So what you're trying to do is give them a wealth of business experience before they've had any business experience so they can get off on the right foot. Is that about right?
Yeah, I'd like to challenge one of the phrases used. Use the term gig work. And I think that there's a lot of lack of understanding of the definitions within this economy. And I think generally it's split into 3 segments. You have gig workers, which is largely competitive on price. You have freelancers, which is skilled freelancers, skilled project-based workers. And you have contractors, which are long-term workers. Usually there's tax structures around the way that they work. Yeah. And I'm really focused on that middle segment. People of high value, delivering high value projects.
What sort of professions are we talking about? Graphic design, software developers?
If you'd have asked me 8 years ago, I'd have said graphic designers, illustrators and journalists. But now it's not restricted to that at all. We deal with engineers, web developers, consultants, financial advisors, accountants. I don't think there's a sector really that's not being touched by this now. And I think the thing that's really interesting is, whereas we use this term freelancer or self-employed, I actually think it's a slight distraction because the future of work is a blended workforce, or it was called a hybridized workforce before COVID, but now we use hybridized to mean working from home. A blended workforce where people are much more transient. Companies have far fewer full-time staff, but rely on really valuable, skilled workers to come and deliver projects. And that's happening across all sectors. Within the creative industries, it's definitely much more advanced, but we're starting to see it across the whole of the economy.
So tell us about Underpinned. What does it offer? How do you make money? What attracts people to use your services?
So I want to kind of caveat this immediately by saying Underpinned is a much bigger research project around the future of work. Now, the future of work is not even close to being realised. Our focus on freelancers is because freelancers are very much the early adopters of this new system of work. And so they are the hotbed of education, of where we can learn how we can build better systems. So what we're really focused on is unlocking the potential of these individuals. And their key barriers to entry are, one, how to build a successful business. In other words, how to commercialize their skill set, which is an education piece. So we have an accelerator program we take people through. Two, how to build a network of people that they get their work from. So how do you start to do this lead generation, to build a network of freelancers and clients so that you can generate a valuable business around you? And then number three, how do you actually manage your projects, manage your systems? Most people in this economy are very focused on the clients because that's where the money ends up. That's where it comes from in the end, Whereas the freelancers are the place where there's the most exciting opportunity, because freelancers, when they are successful, operate like small businesses. So we're effectively creating a simplified system that allows freelancers to operate in the same way an SME would have in the last 15 years.
A small and medium-sized enterprise. So what do people actually get if they use your services, and how do you charge them? Do they get an entry to a website that's got linkages, that's got support structures? Do you have software that helps them do their taxes? Do you help them generate invoices easily?
So we build everything in-house. We have a few people we refer to, but when you sign up, which is £20 a month, you get access to an accelerator program, which is a course that takes through everything you need to know to be a freelancer and teaches you how to use the tools to actually manage your business. Then we give you those tools: lead generation, portfolio development, pitching, project management, network development, CRM management, contracts, invoicing, and then connections to all of the services that you need around that, whether it's insurance or accounting, to make sure that when you are set up with Underpinned, there is no part of the business side of what you do that's not covered. You can be any profession, from any vertical, from any sector, but you come in and you get all of the software, tools, education, community, network that you need to build something successful around your skill set.
That's interesting, isn't it? And what's the take-up been like? When did you actually start this, Albert? You're still a young lad, if I may say so, but obviously you know what you want to do, you're very focused, and you have had some considerable success. That's why you're here. What's happened so far? When did it start?
So we started in August 2018, me and my business partner, Jack Williams, who looks after me dearly. And he basically, his job is to rein me in. And he's very good
businesses need, you need a kind of vision person.
Exactly.
You need like an architect and a plumber, don't you?
Well, I wouldn't call him a plumber, but sure. But we started in 2018 very much with this research mindset. Like when you start a project like this that's this big and has this much scope, you don't jump in and build something. You try and look at what's going on. So it was a lot of research. And the reason we work so well together is his background was media publishing. So we used content to start understanding the narratives were most important in this industry. And we used this content to then inform what we were going to build. So it's actually only been since January that our main products have been live. Previous to that, it's been lots of testing and learning and researching. And the new university partnerships that you mentioned.
That's why we got you on, because that impressed me, the fact that you're working now with serious universities. They've obviously take you seriously. They obviously think that
my aim
it's worth having you, presenting you to their students.
My aim is that every undergraduate in the United Kingdom by the end of 2023 will have access to professional education via Underpinned. But the reason that they're working with us is that their students are asking. You know, the careers and employability departments at universities are very, very geared towards linear employment. And so we've been very focused on telling them, you know, we can offer you the educational content as well as a software system to teach your students the things they need to know to freelance. And their students are asking them constantly. So if I'm honest, the pitch to universities was incredibly easy. They've been jumping at us to get involved because they want their students to have access.
They've got a problem, you're helping them solve it, right?
And ultimately, they're judged based on the employment rates of their students. And if their students are going into self-employment and are not doing very well, that reflects badly on them. So we're giving them an opportunity to open up this massive economic worth, in their students by giving them access to freelancing.
Who's your competition? Is this happening in other parts of the world?
Within the UK, there isn't really any. And we've been getting a lot of interest from big companies and us, mostly because they're looking to the UK and there isn't anyone else operating in this space. In the US, it's a little bit more developed. And there's a lot more money from the kind of marketplace platforms and venture capitalists who are looking to unlock this and pumping a lot of money into projects to try and work out what's going to happen. But within the kind of freelance professional education, most of it's happening at a very grassroots level. So there hasn't really been any significant aggregation like we see in every other sector as it starts to develop and startups start to build. So what we've been really focusing on is, and if I'm honest, I don't want to be the person that is presenting this. I think that actually there is a plethora of interesting people that currently don't have anywhere to be aggregated. And I want to get that diverse group of people and bring their voices together through one platform around the future of the work and the way that people work.
Final question to you, a question I can't answer, but maybe your generation can, Albert. What's the workplace going to look like in 20 years' time? In a country like the UK, a post-industrial, highly educated, technologically advanced, demographically challenged, you might say, country?
I think the most interesting word there is workplace. I think we'll probably remove that altogether. I think that the idea of having a segment of work, a linear part of your life that is work, will disappear. And what will happen is we'll have this much more networky, community-based. Community sounds a bit esoteric. What I mean is people working with multiple people to add value across multiple projects in multiple places. And I think that'll be very globalized. I have no idea what the blended workforce, the future of work will look like exactly. But what I can tell you is if you want to look at the indicators of what it will look like, look to the grassroots of the freelance economy, and that is where there is most to learn.
Albert, I've really enjoyed this discussion, and all the best of luck to you and your business partner, who's not a plumber, with Underpinned. Albert Aziz Coulson, great to have you here on The Money, here on GB News. What an interesting young man. We bring you so many wonderful companies to learn about here on The Money, not least in our Startup Britain slot. And let's bring in some of your views now. Many of you have got in touch via Twitter, ironically. Let's see what you think about a potential takeover of the online platform. Mark said Twitter shareholders are subsidised by the likes of American Democrats, Liberal, Labour left in the UK. It's obvious Twitter can then manipulate politics around the world to suit all these crooks. Well, it's a view. It's a view. Alan says, the issue is not controlling what is being said or published, it's what's not being said. And via Twitter again, Anne says, Elon Musk is an attention seeker. He has 3 citizenships. The sycophancy towards this man is what's wrong. Well, I hope I wasn't too sycophantic. Alison says, so Twitter and social media companies have more control of the globe than leaders. That is the contention. And Elaine says, I'm a Twitter user of 11 years plus. There are rules on Twitter for very good reason. Everyone's subject to them regardless of who they are. Special dispensations shouldn't be given just because someone has a powerful position. The rules need to be seen to be applied evenly, hence Trump got himself banned. Linda says, I'd love to see Elon Musk and Donald Trump running Twitter. All the colours of the rainbow here on GB News, a whole range of opinions. And here's David. Elon Musk is on the money. I see what you did there, David. I like that. When he declares free speech is paramount. Who on this earth has any right to decide what you or I or say or where we say it, Liam? Musk is interested in the truth. Well, there are laws against hate speech, inciting racial hatred and so on. I think we need those laws, but in general, I do like free speech, of course. And Shane says, I hope Musk gains control. Twitter is a one-sided debate. The only way for society to advance is to include the most intelligent segment of society. That is, those who uphold basic truths in all fields. People can be banned from Twitter for pointing out facts and truth, and that's horrifying to me. Keep your emails coming. Tell me what you want to be discussed here on the show. And that's 1 hour down of this 2-hour Good Friday on the Money special. But hold tight, because we're staying with you. We've really treated you so far this Easter. Thanks for joining me during this hour, and stay tuned for the next one, because this is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and you're on the money.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking dry for many, with some sunshine, but cloudier in the west. Let's take a look at the details. Skies are likely to be cloudy across parts of Devon and Cornwall this afternoon, with some drizzle and sea fog in the west. Further east, it'll be brighter with some warm, sunny spells. The brightness extends into southeast England, where there'll be plenty of sunny spells this afternoon, feeling warm in the sunshine with a high of 23 Celsius in London today. It's a cloudier picture for much of Wales, with some patchy drizzle over the hills. The sunshine could break through at times in the east, where it'll feel warm. After a bright start in northwest England, a little cloud will bubble up this afternoon, perhaps with 1 or 2 showers. However, most places should stay dry and warm. A bright and warm day in the northeast too, with some sunny spells. It could be cloudier at times along the coast of Northumberland. There'll be a touch of sunshine in eastern Scotland where it'll feel pleasantly warm, but skies will be cloudier in the west. The cloud could bring a few spots of drizzle at times. Thicker cloud in Northern Ireland will bring some heavy showers this afternoon. The heavy downpours could bring hail and a few rumbles of thunder too. Showers will gradually ease this evening, leaving a dry end to the day for most and a mild evening too. And that is how the weather is shaping up for the rest of the day.
Join us every Sunday at 10 a.m. for The Political Correction.
We're here to put you, the people, back in charge. Our debate is about all areas of the United Kingdom.
It's about what's really going on in our country.
It's about you. So please get in touch and tell us what you think.
Don't miss it. It's The Political Correction every Sunday at 10 a.m. on GB News.
Since the first Gulf War, I've covered complex conflicts around the globe. For comprehensive coverage of the ongoing situation in Ukraine, join me, Alastair Stewart, every Saturday and Sunday from noon.
If you are the most authoritarian regime, at some point they will rise up. Putin can become more dangerous.
You cannot occupy a country of that size.
And that means World War III.
That means war.
Putin did not expect that.
That's me, Alastair Stewart, from 12, Saturday and Sunday on GB News.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome back to On the Money, where we're focused on the UK's cost of living crisis, helping you beat the squeeze. I'm Liam Halligan, and for the second half of this 2-hour On the Money Good Friday special, we're switching the focus from Twitter to Rwanda. Namely, do government proposals to send those entering the UK illegally to a landlocked East African mountainous state make sense? Economically, in practical terms, morally? We host a detailed discussion. Plus, we're talking retirement. Why, for so many Brits, the end of work will actually mean not the end of work. Plus, Ukraine, the country's suffering, and so is its economy. But what does that mean for the rest of Europe? All that and more after the GB News headlines with Tamsin Roberts.
Liam, thank you. Good afternoon. It's just after 2 o'clock. Here's the latest from the GB Newsroom. Russia has vowed to increase its missile strikes on Ukraine after the sinking of one of its warships. Footage from the early hours of Friday morning show a region in the capital Kyiv being struck by bombs. It's after US defense officials say the loss of the Russian warship Moskva in the Black Sea is a big blow to Moscow's military capabilities. The vessel sank after Ukrainian forces claimed to have hit it with missiles on Wednesday. However, the Kremlin claims the vessel went down after an explosion on board. The US National Security Advisor says it's a significant loss to the Kremlin.
It's a big blow to Russia. This is their flagship, the Moscow, and they have now been forced to admit that it has been badly damaged. And they've had to kind of choose between two stories. One story is that it was just incompetence, and the other was that they came under attack, and neither is a particularly good outcome for them.
Downing Street says asylum seekers who've arrived in the UK illegally could be sent to Rwanda within weeks. It follows the announcement of a pilot that will see people sent to the East African country to claim asylum there. Prime Minister Boris Johnson says the £120 million deal will serve as a considerable deterrent to migrants attempting to cross the Channel. The chair of Migration Watch, Alf Mehmet, told GB News that without this measure, hundreds more people will die.
It's not suddenly going to stop all the boats coming across. Of course it's not. It's part of the solution, though. Is it more humane to allow people to risk their lives in dinghies, in really unseaworthy vessels? That's a nonsense. It isn't inhumane. I think this is actually a kind thing to be doing.
UK immigration lawyer Harjit Singh Bangal said the scheme is similar to the one adopted by Australia and says it's unworkable and too expensive.
Last year, Australia processed 249 people offshore. It cost them £461 million, so UK pounds. If we're thinking, and the expectations are now, in the eyes of the British public, oh, this is great, there's going to be 20,000 people sent to Rwanda, their figures just don't make sense at all. £120 million isn't going to cut it.
Hundreds of Palestinians have been detained after clashes with Israeli police at one of Jerusalem's holiest sites. Officers tried to disperse a large crowd of people at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, also known as Temple Mount. Israeli authorities say groups were throwing rocks at the compound after morning prayer. Emergency services say at least 150 people have been injured. The clashes come as Christians, Jews and Muslims prepare to celebrate Easter, Passover and Ramadan. Residents in Shanghai have clashed with police over new coronavirus policies. It's being reported residents have protested after being told to immediately leave their apartment building so the government can use them as a COVID isolation facility. Footage shows people kneeling and even lying down in front of police wearing hazmat suits, with some being dragged away. Latest figures show there are 23,000 infections in Shanghai. Dozens of climate change protesters have been arrested after blocking access to 3 oil terminals. Just Stop Oil activists blocked roads and climbed on top of oil tankers in Staffordshire and Essex. The group, who are linked to Extinction Rebellion, are demanding the government stops new oil and gas projects. One campaigner says the government aren't doing enough.
And obviously we don't do this lightly. We've tried everything else. We've literally done everything we possibly could to get this message across. And it's not a message, it's a cry for help. It's an emergency and we need to be acting like it's an emergency. The UN says it's a code red for humanity and the government are just failing.
England's Test cricket captain Joe Root says stepping down from the role is the most challenging decision of his career. Root holds the record for the highest number of Test match wins as captain since he took on the role in 2017. But he's chosen to leave after 2 series defeats against the West Indies last month and Australia in the winter. Vice-captain Ben Stokes has paid tribute, saying Root has been a privilege to play with. This is GB News. We'll bring you more news as it happens, of course. Now, though, let's get straight back to Liam and On the Money.
And coming up during this second half of On the Money today, do government proposals to send those entering the UK illegally to a landlocked East African state makes sense economically, in practical terms, from a moral point of view. We host a detailed discussion on those Rwanda proposals, which some say are an election winner, others dismiss as cruel. And as this cost of living crisis takes hold, can you afford to retire? One report says that 2/3 of adults will have to keep working, even when their pension kicks in, with many struggling with rising bills. Again, we debate the issues. And keep your emails coming. What do you think of this hour's On the Money? Email gbviews@gbnews.uk or tweet @gbnews. And stay with us. This is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan. You're on the money. Now, tens of thousands of Channel migrants will be given a one-way ticket to Rwanda under plans unveiled yesterday by the government. Anyone entering the UK illegally since January the 1st could be relocated to Rwanda, where they'll be considered for asylum and resettlement. Migrants will have the opportunity to build a new life in Rwanda, says Boris Johnson, supported by an initial £120 million of UK government funding as part of a migration and economic development partnership with the landlocked East African state. And when he spoke yesterday, I have to say the Prime Minister sounded pretty determined.
Economic migrants taking advantage of the asylum system will not get to stay in the UK, while those in genuine need will be properly protected, including with access to legal services on arrival in Rwanda, and given the opportunity to build a new life in that dynamic country, supported by the funding we are providing.
This Rwanda plan was the centrepiece of a package unveiled by Johnson and Home Secretary Priti Patel to combat record numbers of migrants crossing the Channel, already over 5,000 this year alone, more than double the rate of 2021. On Wednesday, 600 migrants reached the UK, the highest number in a single day so far this year. Ministers argue that what they call vile people smugglers are turning the Channel into a watery graveyard, with migrants, quote, drowning in unseaworthy boats and suffocating in refrigerated lorries. Labour calls the government's plans unworkable and cruel. But ministers believe that by reducing the attraction of Britain, the numbers making the perilous journey across the Channel will fall. Plus, the growing backlog of claims means the asylum system now absorbs almost £2 billion of public money a year. Hotels for asylum seekers are costing £4.7 million each and every day. Yes, it will cost between 20,000 and 30,000, ministers estimate, for each migrant sent to Rwanda, but they say that's cheaper in the long run. So what are these measures in terms of economics, humanity, compassion? And that's our second on-the-money question today. Do the government's Rwanda proposals make sense? Join me now in the studio for what will clearly be a contentious debate, but a necessary debate. We have the former UKIP leader and border force expert, Henry Bolton. We have the deputy editor at Conservative Home, Henry Hill. We have refugee and asylum rights director at Amnesty International UK, Steve Valdez-Simmons. Plus, with me in the studio, Vicky Price is still with us. She used to run the government's economic service. Vicky was a senior civil servant. A fabulous cast. Let me start with you, Steve Valdez-Simmons. You're more than welcome on my show. You are the Director for Asylum Rights at Amnesty International UK. Give us your thoughts on these government plans unveiled yesterday.
Well, I read the Memorandum of Understanding. That's the agreement that's been reached yesterday. It's very vague about anything except the one thing it's very clear about is that nothing in this agreement is intended to allow anyone, whether the people who are shipped to Rwanda under it, or indeed the governments themselves, to use it to hold either the UK or the Rwandan government to account. So I think it speaks volumes of what this is about. It is about the UK washing its hands of responsibility for the people involved. As for the money, which I know is of interest to you and your particular show, it says absolutely nothing. It says financial arrangements will be made. It says nothing as to how much this is to cost and how much the UK will ultimately have to pay, or indeed for how many people, at what rate, or anything else.
Steve, let me say I agree with you. The financials surrounding this plan are extremely vague. I've had a rummage around trying to get across them before hosting this debate, and I've so far been pretty stymied as well. Come to the studio now. Let's come to you, Henry Bolton. You'll be known as the former leader of UKIP.
Yes,
but you are.
I shed that, by the way.
You also are a border force expert in your own right. What did you make of these plans? Is there anything in what Steve says? They seem completely uncosted.
I'm going to agree with Steve. Now, that sounds maybe strange, given part of my background. I've helped 14 different countries to write national integrated border management strategies. The UK still doesn't have one. And, Al Mehmet, who you showed earlier from Migration Watch, he said, well, this is one element of what should be a broader plan. And I agree. It may act as some sort of deterrent. But as Steve has quite rightly just said, and you've also noted, the finances are not worked out. 120 million pounds initial package to Rwanda. Well, that sounds like a little bit of a, it's a bit of a bribe to them, effectively. It says that the UK will also provide financial support to integration, accommodation and so on. But none of this is specified, probably because it's almost impossible to say how much this is actually going to cost us in the long run. So what we lack in this country is a cohesive, coordinated national cross-governmental strategy to deal with all aspects of our borders, not just immigration and asylum. But I came up on the train following the M20 today. Nose-to-tail trucks on the M20. That's a border issue.
That's on the way to Kent.
That's on the way down to Dover in Kent, yeah. So that's a border issue. The narcotics and so on that are coming across on the ferries and in some of these small boats, also, that is a border issue. Fisheries, that is a border issue. And yet we've got all of these different agencies working on these borders in their own way. There's no unifying framework. We're doing very little internationally to disrupt these organised crime groups. Until 2006, the UK had a very effective programme to actually go out there proactively with intelligence and tactical operations to disrupt transnational organised crime groups involved in people smuggling and human trafficking. The finance of that was pulled in 2006, but it was highly effective. And what I'm saying here, you've got a number of measures, all of which need to be put together in a coordinated, cohesive way to address the phenomenon of people smuggling and migration to the UK, and in fact, the broader European continent. And we haven't got it at the moment.
OK, let's turn to our second Henry in this discussion, Henry Hill. You're from Conservative Home, Henry, a very influential website where Conservative activists, supporters post articles and so on. You have huge readership. You have polls of which cabinet members are most popular among Tory grassroots activists, the same activists who can decide pretty much who is the Conservative leader. How are these proposals going down among your readers, Henry?
Well, I imagine that in principle they will be going down pretty well, but I think one of the major problems the government faces about this is the corrosive scepticism about the Home Office's capacity to get anything done. Because for years now, the government has been trapped in this cycle of talking really tough about channel boats and then not getting anything done, making no difference. The boats keep coming. And that just means that they sort of get the worst of both worlds, because they increase the salience of the issue and they attract attention to the problem, this visible sign of lack of control, which is what voters tend to hate most about the immigration discussion, rather than anything particularly about numbers, whilst not doing anything about it. I just want to add something quickly about one of the purposes of these proposals that I've heard from Home Office sources, which is that it's actually about one of the biggest problems the Home Office has is that people smugglers encourage people crossing the channel to destroy their papers when they do. And that means that if they reach the UK, as and when we've considered their claim, it is incredibly difficult to return people whose claims fail to their countries of origin if they've destroyed their papers. Now, the threat of having your claim processed in Rwanda is that obviously if your claim fails and you get rejected, you're sort of in Rwanda and you might need your papers to get back to somewhere that you'd rather be. So I think the hope is that even if they don't necessarily start sending everyone to Rwanda straight away or even at all, the risk that you will be sent there will encourage people to hold on to their papers, which will make them easier to process, even if they do end up being processed in the United Kingdom.
We're going to carry this important discussion on over the break. Before we do, Vicky, let's just come briefly to you. I know you feel you're originally from a Greek background, as I'm originally from an Irish background. We're both from immigrant backgrounds. How do you feel about these proposals?
Well, the reaction that most people I know have had is that they are probably not going to work. So, yes, of course, we've all been terribly grateful, you and I, for being in this country, and loads of other people probably watching this. We had to go through various, procedures to get here and so on and get accepted. That was, of course, for me before Greece joined the EU. So
indeed, yeah.
But the issue that we've just been discussing is, you mentioned the civil service. It's very unfair to just say the Home Office has sort of no strategy and is failing all the time. The interesting thing is that the Home Office has been considered to be a failing or
not fit for purpose. Remember, that's John Reid, Tony Blair's Home Secretary.
Indeed, by so many different Home Secretaries that you begin to wonder, and I was certainly wondering that and I knew the very, very good people who were in the Home Office, whether the real problem is that policies change all the time, depending on, because this is, if you want to be tough on law and order and all that sort of stuff, you may need to push the whole thing up a little bit at various times when elections are coming up. So now, for example, the May elections, and then you change the strategy that the civil servants have to work on, or you take some of the funding away because the Treasury has decided.
So with all the political chopping and changing, it makes it very difficult to implement a policy, right?
Well, you change all the time, and therefore it looks, indeed, as Henry was saying, that you're not able to implement. A, have one which is consistent across, and B, implement it. And that's a big, big issue because a lot of these things require a lot of money. Now, remember, the change that's happened now, just recently, what we were hearing from Priti Patel, certainly, was that we were going to turn the boats back. And we were going to intervene to do that, which, of course, has now been considered not to be the right thing to do. So now we've changed it to sending them somewhere else. A little while ago, we heard they were going to all go to Albania. So we've got to bear in mind that there are, for political reasons, all sorts of pronouncements made, which the poor civil servants, if I may defend the civil servants, Henry may decide against that, can't really cope with.
Henry's itching to come in. Henry, I'm going to just park you there, though, if I may, because we are going to come to a break, but we'll come back to you after. It's a fabulous discussion. It's being conducted in a good-natured way. I'm proud of that. So I'm glad you're all here to have this chat. This is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. After the break, we will keep this discussion going with my expert panel. Do the government's Rwanda proposals make sense? Stay with us. You're On the Money.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debate, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's two questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday, for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Welcome back. You're on the money on GB News, TV, DAB, plus digital radio and online. It's 2:21 on this wonderful Good Friday. We're discussing, do government proposals to send those entering the UK illegally to a landlocked East African state make sense economically, in practical terms, morally? We're discussing these Rwanda proposals. I'm still with my expert panel. Let's go back to Steve Valdez-Simmons. Steve, you are from Amnesty International UK. Do you think these proposals will really happen? Or do you think, as some opposition politicians have said, this is all about diverting attention away from Partygate?
Well, I don't think I can comment about Partygate. I mean, that's really politics that's beyond my expertise. I have to accept that. Is it diversionary politics more generally? I think so. At the very least, it's diverting from the real needs and ineptitude of the government, to be honest, in dealing with the necessity of processing and deciding asylum claims. This country doesn't receive a particularly large number of people seeking asylum, hasn't done for a very, very long time. Indeed, for most of the last 3 years, as there's been all this comment about people crossing by boats, the number of people entering the asylum system has largely stayed the same for much of the time. In fact, it reduced. And so policy like this doesn't address the real needs either for the government in managing the asylum system, the civil servants who have to do with that, or, of course, the people at the heart of this, some of whom, very few of whom, may well be subject to this. For no other reason, the government has made so much noise that to fail to impose this upon somebody will look now, I suppose, like a monumental failure. I hope it doesn't happen, but I can't be sure of that.
What do you think, Henry Bolton? You're a border expert, you're a former UKIP politician. Do you think this is about flying a kite, about a political flag to the Tory faithful ahead of those local elections in early May? Or do you think the ministers really are gearing up the Home Office to make this major change? We've got an Australian point-style system on legal migration. Why not an Australian system for dealing with illegal immigration?
Well, firstly, we're not Australia. We're not in the same part of the world, and the migration dynamics in this part of the world are very different. And I absolutely would urge all government ministers and anybody involved in this to avoid simply transplanting something that's worked in one place and apply it here. There are lessons to be learned, of course, but we need a bespoke solution. And I think that's what they're trying to get at. To answer your question in the political sense, you know, of course, this has been a major issue. It's been a major political issue of contention since we left the European Union, retake control of our borders and so on. And what have we actually done? We've not very much. We've seen figures coming across the channel increase very rapidly and to very worrying extents.
Steve Valdez-Simmons says that the numbers aren't that great. Yes, it's very shocking telly, people arriving on the beaches, but the actual numbers are relatively low.
But Liam, you know, I have a military background as well, and policing background, and it really concerns me that we have nearly 30,000 people coming across the channel in a year that we don't know who they are. We're not able to manage them properly. Ultimately, most of them then end up staying here because the burden of proof as to whether or not they're likely to be persecuted or whatever, wherever they come from, if they come from.
The security issue trumps even the economic issue.
There's all sorts of issues, and a lot of these people are arriving on our coast without us knowing that they're on their way. A lot of them just arrive on the beach. Now, that is not the way to manage our borders. That worries me. But let's go back to the politics for a moment. Of course, it's a political issue because of all of this. We all know that. I mean, it's obvious. And of course, it's something that the Conservative Party can gain support through. But I think there is also a legitimate wish, or not legitimate, a genuine wish on the part of the government, the Conservative Party and so on, to deal with this problem and address it somewhat. Going back to the Home Office, as we were saying earlier, I think certainly no criticism of individual civil servants, because I've worked with many civil servants over the last 20 plus years, some incredibly bright, wonderful people. But it's about how you organise them. Now, I know that up until about 8 months ago, I don't know whether it's the case now, that there was no task force, no working group working specifically on this issue. The Home Office was driven by a response to bad press on this, rather than on actually addressing the problem. And if you've got civil servants who are being moved around all the time, it's not just about policy changing, it's about people moving, and they're not working on the same subject for very long. You need a team that is focused. There needs to be a national coordinator with a team that is actually pulling all of these strands together, properly qualified planners to develop a national strategy on this issue. Otherwise, we're just going to have lots of knee-jerk reactions, some of which might work a little bit, some of them won't work at all, and we'll end up with what we've got now, this sequence of headlines, and that's it.
I'm going to bring in Vicky Price in just 1 second, Vicky, if I may, because I just want to go back to Steve Valdez-Simmons of Amnesty International UK. Steve, let me just put that specific point to you that Henry made there. Even if it's not an economic issue, it's a security issue. How's a government meant to deal with people who turn up having destroyed their documents because they think that's the best way to game the system? How can you process those people from a security point of view?
The Home Office has been doing that literally for decades. The reality is that, yes, smugglers do put pressure on and instruct people to destroy documents and indeed provide false ones for people to travel on. The reason all of that happens is that this country, like so many others, makes no provision for anyone under our immigration rules to apply, to obtain a visa, to make a journey to this country to claim asylum. There's nothing in our rules allows that. Everything in our rules says any such visa will be refused or cancelled if its purpose is for that, and you cannot claim asylum unless you get here first. Now, those are the rules that we have been working to in this country literally for decades. So it hasn't been an issue along the sort of lines that is being suggested for all of that time. I'm not suggesting that there doesn't need to be screening and interviewing of people when they arrive. Frankly, the journeys that now happen are the most visible, least clandestine journeys in all of this time. You can see people from the cliffs of Dover, watch them arrive, make provision for when they're going to arrive. They're all coming to claim asylum. So honestly, the security issue around boat crossings is a complete red herring.
Let's bring Vicky Price in now. You waited very patiently, Vicky. Henry sort of slightly apologised a little bit about the civil service. You were formerly a distinguished civil servant. What's your view on this? You said you spoke powerfully before the break about how ministers kept chopping and changing and using, border security policies as sort of political ornaments. Do you think this proposal will actually happen, or do you just think it's political posturing?
Well, the first thing to bear in mind is that, of course, there's going to be loads and loads of judicial sort of questioning of this. So it's going to take some time. In fact, the Prime Minister said the same, that he expects that's going to be the case. Of course, he was trying to discourage that from happening, but it's bound to. Or
maybe he wants to fight. Bring it on.
But by then we would have had so many other problems to worry about. The elections will have happened. I can't see anyone sort of being sent immediately to Rwanda without some sort of stopping that by some judge at some point. So we might see a little bit of that happening, a few people going. But the moment the Treasury starts realising what the cost of this will be, which is going to be quite significant, and the outcry that we've already seen from Europe, for example, from all around the world about this particular
Well, the Danes are going to do the same thing. There's a centre-left government in Denmark who are suggesting they may follow the Brits.
Well, we will see if that, in fact, happens. I mean, it's a good point you're making, but we've already had Strasbourg, the Parliament, they're actually issuing a statement saying it's completely unacceptable what's going on, and we're really worried about this and about the UK. And of course, we're not members any longer, but we are nevertheless signatories to wider issues in terms of human rights and so on, and asylum and so on. So I suspect that we might, just to prove that this time round, unlike the turning the ships back, we're doing something. and we're fulfilling this promise, but I suspect the numbers are going to be quite small, and we'll go back to what we were doing before.
Let me give the last word to Henry Hill of Conservative Home on the raw politics of this. Henry, there's no polite way to ask you this. Are these proposals a vote winner?
If they work, I mean, they've not been conjured just to deal with Partygate. I think I first heard the word Rwanda whispered to me by a Home Office source sort of mid last year. So they've been working on this for a while. But I think if they manage to bring numbers down, if they can go into the next election and say, look, we've done this and it was tough, but it has worked, and we brought numbers down and we increased repatriations and all the rest of it, then yes, that might work. But if what happens is what normally happens, which is it simply doesn't work, there's a series of high-profile failures and numbers and channel crossings remain exactly the same, then no, I don't think it will.
Well, it's been a fabulous discussion. I'm grateful to all of you for conducting it in a civilised, decent way. There's been a proper adult exchange of views here. So thank you to Steve Valdez-Simmons of Amnesty International UK, to Henry Hill of Conservative Home, Henry Bolton, Border Force expert, and indeed, friend of the show, Vicky Price. Always a pleasure to have you on the show, Vicky. And this is On the Money with me, Liam Halligan. It's 2:31, and coming up, we'll be talking about all things Ukraine as the war drives inflation higher and hits the economy harder, especially in Europe. But first, the GB News headlines with Tamsin Roberts.
Liam, thank you. It's 2:32. Here's the latest from the GB newsroom. Russia has vowed to increase its missile strikes on Ukraine after the sinking of one of its warships. Footage from the early hours of this morning shows an area near the capital Kiev being struck by bombs. It's after US defense officials say the loss of the Russian warship Moskva in the Black Sea is a big blow to Moscow's military capabilities. The vessel sank after Ukrainian forces claimed to have hit it with missiles on Wednesday. The Kremlin claims the vessel went down after an explosion on board. Hundreds of Palestinians have been detained after clashes with Israeli police at one of Jerusalem's holiest sites. Officers tried to disperse a large crowd of people at the Al-Aqsa Mosque, also known as Temple Mount. Israeli authorities say groups were throwing rocks at the compound after morning prayer. At least 150 people have been injured. The clashes come as Christians, Jews and Muslims prepare to celebrate Easter, Passover and Ramadan. Dozens of climate change protesters have been arrested after blocking access to 3 oil terminals. Just Stop Oil activists blocked roads and climbed on top of tankers in Staffordshire and Essex. The group, who are linked to Extinction Rebellion, are demanding the government stops new oil and gas projects. TV, online and DAB+ radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere, it's back to Liam and On the Money in just a moment.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr. Me and my panel will get stuck right into the day's events, and I can tell you, in fact, I can warn you, expect some robust debates, some strong opinions and perspectives from both sides of the fence. It's about you at home as well. I love to read out all of your comments, or at least as many as I can. So join me, Michelle Dewberry, Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
On radio, they call it the drive time slot, 4 p.m. until 6 p.m. as listeners head home. It's that part of the schedule when the dust of the day's events begin to clarify, and we try to make sense of it for you. Brazier is drive time for radio and TV. It's fast, it's punchy, it's opinionated, there's a Brazier angle and a little bit of levity.
That's the question. That's 2 questions, actually.
That's Brazier, Monday to Thursday, 4 till 6 on GB News.
Hello, I'm Patrick Christie's.
And I'm Mercy Moroki.
Make sure that you join us Monday to Thursday, 10 a.m. until midday, right here on GB News for To The Point.
We're not afraid to talk about the topics that matter to you, or the big topics that always matter.
We cover absolutely everything, from the breaking political stories of the day to law and order, what's going on in the channel. We're not afraid to hold people to account.
We always make sure we include your views on our show.
Indeed, if you're thinking it, you can guarantee that we're saying it. So make sure you join the conversation with us, 10 a.m. until midday, Monday to Thursday for To The Point on GB News.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton Tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
And welcome back to On the Money. The war in Ukraine rumbles on, and we're seeing the impact at home, of course, as fuel bills and food prices rise. The European Central Bank has said this Russia-Ukraine conflict is driving inflation higher and hitting the economy harder in the Eurozone compared to other regions. In March, Eurozone inflation hit a new high of 7.5%. It was 7%, of course, in the UK. So what are the economic consequences of this war in Ukraine so far and ongoing? The consequences in Britain, in Europe and beyond. Will this impact become more intense as the war continues? Well, joining me now live from Ukraine and the Romanian border is the journalist Mircea Barbu. Great to have you on the show, Mircea. We really appreciate your time. And Vicky Price is still with me, Chief Economic Advisor at the Centre for Economic and Business Research. Mircea, of course, the main point about this war is the ghastly human suffering, the sovereignty issues involved, but the economic fallout is getting more prominent. It's getting talked about more, isn't it? How do you see the interaction between the economic issues of this war and the military issues of this war?
Well, indeed, Liam, they are not separated completely. As any war, economic and human suffering are often intertwined. And I've seen that since the first day of war in Mariupol, where I was when the war started, up until today at the Romanian-Ukrainian border, where every day I talk to people, mostly Romanians living on the Romanian side of the border or ethnic Romanians living on the Ukrainian side of the border, who are complaining that their lives are being affected by the war every day, by the fact that there are no investments coming in or out of Ukraine. Jobs are mostly put on hold at the moment, and that obviously brings more suffering and more tension and more stress to families already fleeing conflict. Now, that's the human interest, so to say, aspect of economics and human suffering, but there is a regional that could potentially turn into a world problem happening right here between Romania and Ukraine. And I'm going to briefly describe it for you. As you probably know, Ukraine has Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia account for about 80% of grain export in the world, Ukraine being a third of one of the largest exporters of grain, a third of that coming from the country currently at war. Now, all the ports at the Black Sea, and not only at the Black Sea, but all the ports that Ukraine has at the moment have been blocked by Russian ships. That means in practice that the grains are not coming out. None of the exports that Ukraine badly needs to support its economy. 50% of its exports are grain-based exports, are coming out of their Ukrainian ports. What happened in Romania in the last month or so, there's been a very heated debate on what Romania can do about it, /EU, what sort of solidarity we can provide. And there was one in the sense that the largest port at the Black Sea right now is currently in Romania, and it's called Constanța. If it's taken a lot of the grain export and a lot of the whatever trickles down into Ukraine at the moment happens through this port. The only downside to this is that Romania in general, as a country, has one of the weakest infrastructures in the European Union, including its port infrastructure, which was never constructed to cope with such an influx or to hold grains for long periods. If you want to put it this way, it's a port that it's mostly for transfers, quick in and outs of goods, merchandises, grains, oil, or whatnot.
Mecha, you've described brilliantly a point that we've been making here on the show, albeit very distanced from the Black Sea, that those Black Sea ports are blocked. Odessa, the other Black Sea Ukrainian ports, have been the grain funnel of Russia and Ukraine for generations. It worries me not only that grain isn't getting out of Ukraine, be it Russian grain, Ukrainian grain, it also worries me that because of the huge turmoil in Ukraine, Ukrainian farmers aren't planting now. So it's not just a shortage of wheat now, it's a shortage of wheat next year as well. Is that something that you're thinking about, something that you're seeing?
Well, that was definitely a question on my mind. And I've asked the people, farmers, including farmers I spoke with throughout my journey in Ukraine. I read a quote from the Ministry of Agriculture in Ukraine giving an interview to Romanian media where they said they are their supplies are about to last about a year and a half. And after that, they don't know what's going to happen. In terms of this year's campaign, obviously, Eastern Ukraine and a lot of the central part of Ukraine is not secure to be farmed, to be to have those spring and summer agriculture campaigns that will turn into grains in the fall. So that's a huge concern for Ukrainian farmers who I spoke with personally throughout the last weeks, because obviously that was a question I had on my mind. And one interesting answer I've got, and it was just a regular, your average farmer, very close to Odessa. He said, I am affected by the war, but think about the fact that I used to export my grains to the Middle East. And there are hundreds of farmers like me in Ukraine. What's going to happen when Africa, Middle East, and a lot of the countries, the countries that are already affected by some sort of drought, migration, or conflict, they will no longer get the Ukrainian bread. That's when you will see what the Ukrainian war means to the world. And that was something that obviously made me think for a long time. It's one of the biggest questions.
Mitch, that is a really, really powerful point. Of course, the Arab Spring was sparked by rising food prices in North Africa and the Middle East more broadly. Mircea Babu, you've spoken very clearly, and we're most grateful to you for appearing on The Money here on GB News. Mircea Babu there, Romanian journalist from the Romanian capital, Bucharest. Let's just pick this up with Vicky Price. You and I have sort of tiptoed around this issue over recent weeks. It seems almost tasteless to talk about the economic impact of the war in Ukraine, but it's almost impossible to ignore, isn't it, when you think about the strategic importance of Russia's exports, of Ukraine's exports, not just energy, which everyone focuses on. That's the big kind of, the geopolitical one, but it's food, isn't it, going forward? It's food that's really going to have the impact.
Well, food is very important in politics as well, I'm afraid. Just as you were suggesting, there have already been riots across the world because food prices are now at the highest that they've ever been. So there's been a big change that's taken place because of the war. It was already happening a little bit before.
Yeah.
But if you look at Russia and the Ukraine, they export some 25% of the world's wheat. So that's hugely important, obviously, for everyone. We've just been hearing about bread. If you can't have the staple foods that everyone sort of relies on. And of course, lots of countries are now looking also at, in Europe, and what stocks have you got of all those products? And are there some speculators around? Because for the moment, there's still quite a lot of wheat around that one can have. Even here in the UK, we're self-sufficient, as you and I have been discussing before. But the prices are worldwide in terms of the way that they're set, and therefore everyone's prices are going up. So some of the countries in Europe are already looking at putting controls of how these prices are increasing. And that's linked to politics, because obviously, their own population is going to like it. But there are serious problems. First of all, of course, the Ukraine itself is likely to see GDP fall by something like 45%, is what the World Bank has just said. But if you look at the surrounding areas, we've just been hearing about Romania, many of them were dependent on all that type of foreign direct investment going in and out, if you like, a lot of money coming going both ways between those regions. And then, of course, the whole, energy, gas and oil prices going up, depending on Russia and the Ukraine more generally, for all sorts of other things, fertilizers, of course, really important, sunflower oil. I mean, Ukraine seems to be the main producer of sunflower.
80%. And that's in everything. That's in margarine, that's in shampoo, that's in all kinds of processed foods.
Indeed. So what the World Bank is now saying is revise this forecast as well for the surrounding region, what it calls the Europe and Central Asia region, which are all sort of around Russia and the Ukraine, which includes a number of Western European countries as well, but certainly, the West Balkans, quite a lot of former Eastern Europe, and of course further into Russia, with a lot of possible unrest therefore coming as a result. And looking ahead
of rising fuel and food prices.
And also, the extraordinary thing, of course, that none of us think about, but it also affects the place I originally come from, which is Greece, is that tourists from Russia and the Ukraine were very important for many of these countries, including Greece. And also remittances, because loads of people worked in Russia and they were sending lots of money into the Central Asian countries, which are now going to suffer from that. So there's a serious issue about how we recover from this.
All these ripple effects. Very well explained, Vicky Price. Thanks a lot for that. Now, Easter weekend's always a busy time for travel, of course, and today, Good Friday, is expected to be the busiest travel day of the year so far. But staff shortages, industrial action and engineering works means there is heavy disruption on the trains today, as I found trying to get into the studio. Our reporter Ellie Costello sent this update from St Pancras Station in central London.
Well, the Easter weekend, unfortunately, is synonymous with travel chaos, and this is the first COVID restriction-free Easter weekend in over 2 years. So you can see why people are absolutely desperate for a holiday or to get about on the trains to go and see family and friends up and down the country. But if you are heading out and about on the trains, do be aware that there is a lot of disruption and delays on the rail today. I'm outside St Pancras Station, which is the home of the Eurostar, and this weekend is expected to be the busiest weekend for Eurostar in 2 years. There's a COVID-era record of 14 trains today from Britain to France, and the queues in St Pancras are really long. Eurostar have tweeted to say that if you are getting on a Eurostar service, to arrive at least 90 minutes before the departure of your train to allow for your passport to be checked and to clear security. And I have been speaking to people inside who arrived over an hour before their train, and they're not even at the front of those very long queues. So do make sure that you leave plenty of time before your departure time. If you are heading out on the trains today, just in the UK, I'm afraid that has got a lot of disruption too. Network Rail are using the Easter weekend to carry out 530 engineering projects on our rails up and down the country. So you can imagine the kind of disruption that is going to include. London Waterloo, the line west of Staines will be closed. So if you're heading down to the southwest of the country, do be aware that that route is heavily disrupted. You may want to look at other ways of travelling. Just down the road from here is Euston Station, which is one of the busiest stations in London. That is actually closed entirely from Good Friday to Easter Monday. They say that's to replace the tracks and improve the switch crossings there. There's also going to be disruption on the Trans-Pennine services due to industrial action. And the London Piccadilly line is down, heading from Acton Town to Heathrow. So do be aware as well, if you're heading to the airport this weekend, if you're trying to get out of the country, that if you're relying on a train to get to any of the three busiest airports in London, which is Heathrow, Gatwick and Stansted, all three airports are disconnected from public transport over the Easter weekend. There's going to be no Gatwick Express going from London Victoria, and there's going to be no Stansted Express trains either, but there will be alternative train or bus routes for both of those. So the message is, do check before you travel. There may be alternative arrangements that have been taking place, and do be patient. Do allow time for these journeys, and ultimately be safe however you are travelling this Easter weekend.
Ellie Costello there outside St Pancras Station in central London. Well, the pandemic must be over because there's travel chaos, one way of looking at it. The cost of living crisis is hitting everyone in the pockets, of course, not least Britain's elderly. Yesterday, Age UK told On the Money that 1 in 6 pensioners live in poverty in this country. But a new report suggests that 2/3 of adults hoping to retire will actually have to carry on working. The research commissioned by investment company Aberdeen also found 1 in 4 adults have no idea of how to lessen the impact of inflation on their retirement income. And for some, this could anyway be out of their hands, as 1 in 5, their main source of income is the basic state pension, which rose just 3.1% at the beginning of this month. For the next year, it will stay there, lagging well behind the government's 7.4% inflation forecast for 2022. So, of course, the real value of that pension is undermined by inflation. Joining me now to discuss this is Colin Dyer. He's a retirement expert from Aberdeen. Colin, good to have you on the show here on The Money. What did you think, first off, about that 3.1% increase in the basic state pension?
It's obviously a concern, Liam, thank you for having me on. It's obviously a concern to many pensioners who are trying to make sure that they are able to kind of meet the often discussed rising cost of living. I heard your previous interview with Vicky, and she was speaking about some of the dynamics behind that. As you've said, you've almost got that kind of 4% gap between what inflation is anticipated to be this year and what we've seen coming through for the basic state pension. And so many of your viewers, I'm sure all across the UK, will be experiencing the reality of that week to week and month to month. It can be pretty shocking to open the gas and electricity bills or to stand in disbelief in a petrol station forecourt and watch how much money has been poured into the tanks.
And what really struck me about your report there, Colin, was the number of people who reach retirement age but are going to have to carry on working. How serious a problem is that? My sense was always that for the current generation of pensioners, while of course there is some pensioner poverty, as Age UK highlighted on this show yesterday, pension provision is generally not too bad. It's people currently in their 30s, 40s and 50s for whom pensioner provision is much, much less. Am I wrong?
Well, not at all. It's certainly interesting to us, Liam. This is the 3rd year that we've done this research. We've looked at 2,000 people all across the UK who are retiring. And in this research from Aberdeen, we see this big dynamic, this big trend this year that, as you've said, 66% of people are now no longer stepping fully and finally into retirement. As we look back 2 or 3 decades, 20, 30 years ago, we think that retirement was much more of a kind of binary event where someone would maybe work 5 days a week flat out until they were 60 or 65 and then completely stop and completely start to draw on their pension income. That is clearly changing. We've got a comfortable majority, this 66% who are no longer doing that. Now, to your point, sometimes it's driven by necessity. Sometimes they are concerned about have they got enough income, particularly with these very high levels of inflation. But it's not always bad news. We think for a lot of these people across the UK, it can be as often for positive reasons. Some people quite enjoy their work. They just want to cut back to part-time hours. Others want to start a whole new job or maybe even a brand new business venture.
I must say, Colin, I'm less concerned about the current generation of pensioners, setting aside, the very real poverty that some of them are feeling, which, of course, needs to be addressed. But for the current generation of pensioners, if retirement is less of a cliff edge and more of a kind of gradual off-ramp where you wind down going to 3 days a week, that's got to be a good thing, hasn't it? That's got to be good for your life, your mental health, your self-esteem, so you're not just sitting in front of the telly all day.
Absolutely agree, Liam. I think actually some people in the past where it was much more of that kind of binary event, it can almost be quite a shocking thing psychologically. Because when we're working, we're out in a social environment. It's nice to be wanted, to be needed, and all of the kind of structure that goes around employment or work. To completely stop that, and as you say, just be sitting at home, in the past, I think has been a challenge to a number of people. So it's just great that people see the opportunity for a much more flexible start to the retirement, and they will experience many different chapters through the retirement.
Well, Colin Dyer from investment company Aberdeen. It is an interesting piece of research. I'm sorry we haven't got more time to talk about it today, but we will get you back on the show. These retirement issues, hugely important to On the Money, to GB News and to many of our viewers. Let's just have a few quick emails to end. Lots of you on the government's Rwanda plan. Surprise, surprise. David said, what about all the illegal immigrants already here in hotels? All illegal immigration must be stopped. We can't even look after our own, let alone the rest of the world. Colin contacted us. Germany took in over 1 million Syrians who are estimated to have added 1% to their GDP. Therefore, it's clearly advantageous for Britain to settle migrants with jobs. We have over 1 million vacancies. Thanks for all your messages today. It's been an On the Money 2-hour special. I've thoroughly enjoyed being with you over the last 2 hours. I hope you've learnt stuff and found it interesting. I'll be back on Tuesday at 1 p.m. helping you beat the squeeze. But for now, happy Easter. Have a lovely bank holiday weekend, because this is GB News. I'm Liam Halligan, and that was On the Money.
Looking ahead to this afternoon, and the UK is looking dry for many, with some sunshine, but cloudier in the west. Let's take a look at the details. Skies are likely to be cloudy across parts of Devon and Cornwall this afternoon, with some drizzle and sea fog in the west. Further east, it'll be brighter with some warm, sunny spells. The brightness extends into southeast England, where there'll be plenty of sunny spells this afternoon, feeling warm in the sunshine with a high of 23 Celsius in London today. It's a cloudier picture for much of Wales, with some patchy drizzle over the hills. The sunshine